Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. This is an educational channel where we take a look at great theories of everything, ancient and modern, primarily from obscure sources, things that you can hang your hat on, full cosmologies, grand unified theories, theories of everything, and kind of maybe eventually getting to the point where we'll be comparing and contrasting as well. But these are things that will help us out with our paradigm shifting, our awakening to 5D consciousness, our formation of a holistic worldview, and are good for our physical, mental, and spiritual health. Today's our 36th video that we've done on Daniel Ingram and his book called Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha. And I'm not presenting to you an alternative religion. I see Buddhism as really a technique, a method, a process, a technology, something that you can use to wake yourself up, something that you can use to eliminate suffering for yourself. And it's a 2,500-year-long tradition. And over the years, many people have gotten to that point. And they have written back and, encouraged others. And so there is a method that has stood the test of time, that Mr. Ingram has retrieved for us from the jungles and the monasteries of the Far East, in Burma and Thailand and Malaysia, along with many retreats in the West as well. And he has brought, through his experiences, has brought a lot of this together in this book here called Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha. It's really like a reference work. You can refer to it a little bit at a time. And he lays it out for us. And I appreciate it. And I think right now we're in chapter 28, which is on the formless jhanas, shamatha jhanas. Jhana is like a trance state or a mode of attention, I guess I would say one of those. It is a state of attention. And there are 4 jhanas with form and 4 jhanas that are formless. And you get into them through meditation, concentration meditation. And they are hard to attain, but it is possible. It has been done by many people. And so, it's a viable method. Okay, so we're going to take over. I think we're talking here about the 6th jhana. We'll start right here. Nothingness done well. That's the name of the jhana, nothingness. That's the 7th. Let's see where we're at here. Okay, yeah, so we did start the 7th jhana, nothingness. Nothingness done well is truly formless, truly just as advertised, except for the ultra subtle stuff that implies nothingness, which is in fact something, just very subtle. It is truly a profound experience, and due to this profundity, even glimpses of very well-developed nothingness can convince people it is something much higher. It is one of the common mimics, confused with more significant experiences. It is one of the standard contenders for what my teacher Bill called unknowing experiences, meaning experiences for which there is little basis upon which to base an opinion about what they are. From nothingness, the seventh jhana, the meditator can, one, get stuck. But this is not quite as likely as with the first two formless jhanas, as this state is quite refined, but perhaps not as breathtaking or captivating, and therefore not as easy to get attached to as the first two in some ways, except perhaps for those who are very averse to experience in general. 2. Move on to the next jhana. Or 3. Investigate this state. And that is, investigate is always what he means. Investigate for the three characteristics: impermanence, dissatisfactoriness, and not self. And so all of our sense impressions and our mental impressions have the three characteristics. And that is the focus of insight practice. So you have the option of changing your concentration practice to insight practice in the seventh jhana. It may seem incredible that the sensations of nothingness itself could be observed to arise and pass, that is, impermanence, that is, strobe in and out of reality, or that they could be known to neither satisfy nor be self, the second two characteristics, or the property of self. However, this is possible, if potentially quite disconcerting due to its extreme profundity and ability to really kick some sense into the mind about the truth of things. We tend to like a place to stand, some this side, to stay stable. In nothingness, things are stripped down as far as you can go and still investigate. So when the rug of the illusion of permanence is pulled out from under us by nothingness strobing, then nothing is left, as it were. It also helps debunk the false idea that this jhana is some ultimate and stable something, some objectively existing void, some peace that passeth all understanding, some awareness, some infinite potential, or whatever. The three illusions of stability, satisfactoriness, and self can begin to be penetrated in the highest state, in which this can be accomplished by paying close attention to every instant that nothingness or equanimity are perceived with precise attention to the exact arising and passing of each, that these transient moments do not satisfy, and that neither can a self be ascribed to them. Since this is a particularly subtle business, the meditator may also leave the jhana and begin insight practice in the significant afterglow of this state, as before. Strobing sensations of nothingness are more likely to arise during the progress of insight in the stage called high equanimity, for those with very strong concentration skills. If you are more of a jhana practitioner and wish to try this, consider making a resolution to perceive the impermanent nature of the sensations of nothingness before you get into that jhana, and practice seeing the impermanent nature of the jhanas before it, to train the mind to becoming used to investigating jhanas. Okay, now we're moving on to the eighth jhana, which is called neither perception nor non-perception. If meditators wish to attain the 8th jhana, they can simply hang out in nothingness, the 7th jhana, until they get bored with perception entirely and understand that even the profoundly subtle perception that is nothingness is subtly disconcerting or dissatisfying. Thus, the mind will eventually shift on its own to the state with the perplexing but thoroughly appropriate title of neither perception nor non-perception, hereafter the 8th jhana. This state is largely incomprehensible. There is no reasonable way to attempt to describe it, save that it is a mind state. I am tempted to say that in it we are simultaneously focused so narrowly that we notice nothing, and yet so broadly focused that we don't notice even that. But such a description doesn't do this state justice. Another way I sometimes think of this state is like what happens when you turn off an old tube-driven black and white television when the screen goes blank, and just before it shuts off, there is this tiny pale dot in the middle of the screen. It is like what happens just at the moment that dot is right on the edge of being totally gone, as if you froze in time that edge right between the dot being there and not being there, and had it applied to everything in your whole sensate world. One way or another, there is complete inattention to diversity, or divestment from attention to multiplicity, however you wish to think of it. The 8th jhana is the highest of the standard ordinary states of concentration that can be attained. And in parentheses here he says, ignoring the attainment of nirodha samapatti, also known as the cessation of perception and feeling, and some more unusual jhanic goodies detailed later. This state is contrasted with the first 7 jhanas in that it is not possible to investigate this state because it is too incomprehensible. Thus, as this state ends, the meditator may return to lower states or turn to insight practice in the afterglow of this state. In contrast to the previous 7 jhanas, the issue of hard or soft jhana that relates to how solidly one is in a state does not apply to the 8th jhana. You are either in it or you are not. Just as with nothingness, and due to its profundity, it is also a very common mimic of some higher attainments, leaving people confused and possibly overcalling their attainments when they confuse it for something more profound, and it can become one more of the golden chains. It is also on the standard list of unknowing events, and sorting out this from the other unknowing events on the list requires a sophisticated meditative palate and solid phenomenological competence. The 8th jhana may have a certain stability that nothingness doesn't, due to the inability to make sense of it. Thus, the mind may move fairly quickly from boundless consciousness through nothingness and drop into the 8th jhana for a while, though the vaguest hint of attention to anything specific demolishes this state instantly. It is also possible to sort of drift up and down through the various formless realms, and downshifting to lower jhanas after being in higher jhanas, such as this one, can lend a great deal of intensity to them. While I recommend the traditional way to attain the formless realms, cultivating each one, then, after mastering it, attempting to get to the next, that is not how I attained to them the first time. I was on retreat And my momentary concentration had gotten quite strong through doing insight practices and having gotten what I was gunning for on that retreat. I finally decided to take a break and see what the jhanas were all about. I simply made a resolution for the jhanas to arise, inclined my mind in the direction of the smooth and peaceful, and stayed with what happened. And jhanas 1 through 8 showed up over about 45 minutes. This is not the typical path by which people attain them, but it is worth mentioning in order to make a general point, which is that if you get your concentration strong by any method, including momentary concentration, just inclining to the shamatha jhanas might be enough for them to occur. The flip side of this is that if your concentration is not strong, no matter how hard you try, not much will likely happen. So, if you are having a hard time getting into the jhanas, set yourself up to succeed, meaning give yourself some high-quality, protected time. Pick a technique you really enjoy that has a demonstrated track record of producing strong concentration states, such as the standard kasana practices, of which a candle flame is my favorite. I've also used blue, red, and white discs, and even large filled-in circles and other images such as stars with circles around them on my computer screen. Again, refer to works such as Bhante Ganatarana's writings on the Visuddhimagga, and practice all day long, every day for a week or 3 or longer. It is amazing what sort of momentum will produce, what that sort of momentum will produce, and it can open whole worlds of access that you never dreamed existed and might not have been able to reach, or reach to that degree of depth. And with that facility, you had you not done this. The works of Venerable Pa Auk Sayadaw are also worth checking out, as his tradition prides itself on being very strong jhana practice. Finally, I should add that there is something I call the post-8th junction point, which is the state of mind created when we have just been in the 8th jhana, left it, and now rest in its afterglow. I should come up with a catchier name for it, as even its acronym, PAGAP, is clunky to say. Anyway, this refers to the fact that once we have the 8th jhana, all sorts of options may be open to the meditator that weren't open in the same way before. As the Shamatha First fans will point out, the standard Pali canon text will say things along the lines of the meditator left the 8th jhana, turned the mind to seeing with wisdom, and attained to awakening. Such statements refer to investigating your experience in the afterglow of the 8th jhana. There are many options for skilled and properly trained practitioners in the P8JP, which is like standing in the grand central terminal of high states and stages, or like being in a room with many open doors lining the walls that you just have to step through. I will talk about more of these later, but just keep in mind, as a version of this will show up in the next chapter on the stages of insight. Even a few seconds in the 8th jhana produces this P8JP option enhancement effect. Okay, this next section is called Limitations of Concentration Practice. Just to drive this point home, an important feature of concentration practices is that they are not liberating in and of themselves. Even the highest of these states ends. The afterglow from them does not last long. Regular life and reality might even seem like an assault when that afterglow has worn off. However, jhana junkies abound in all traditions and even outside traditions, and many have no idea that this is what they have become. I have a friend who has been lost in the formless realms for over 20 years, attaining them again and again in practice, rationalizing that he is doing Dzogchen practice when he is just staying in the 4th through 6 jhanas, and further rationalizing that the last 2 formless realms are emptiness and that he is enlightened. This story, or a version of it, repeats countless times. It is a true Dharma tragedy. Unfortunately, as another good friend of mine rightly pointed out, it is almost impossible to reach such people after a while. They get trapped in temporary attainments, so exquisite that they have no idea they are in prison, nor do they take at all kindly to suggestions that this may be so, particularly if their identity has become bound up in their false notion that they are a realized being. Chronic jhana junkies are fairly easy to spot, even though they often imagine that they are not. We are all presumably able to take responsibility for our choices in life. So if people want to be jhana junkies, that's their choice. And the jhanas clearly beat most things one could become addicted to. However, when people don't realize that this is what they have become and pretend that what they are doing has anything to do with insight practices, that's a truly lost opportunity to put those attainments into the service of achieving actual realization and true freedom. All right, that's the end of the chapter. We're now moving into chapter 29, which is called Kasina practice. For those who want standard Kasina practice instructions right now without having to read the original or commentarial sources, which I highly recommend you do, here is my take on basic Kasina practice. I'm going to revisit Kasina practice in a few sections, adding bits of data, case reports, and theory to the initial presentation you find here as new concepts are explained and then related back to this practice. Still, these basic instructions done in high enough doses should allow you to realize all that for yourself if done well. Pick a kasina, such as a blue disc, a computer-generated blue circle on a black background, or, my favorite, a candle flame. You can find YouTube videos of a candle burning for just this purpose, saving you the cost of actual candles and the fire risk. Any light bulb will do. You could use the LED on your phone. You could use a plate. You could use a brick, for that matter. But brighter objects and objects having greater color contrast with their background make it easier. So a brick would do better against, say, a blue or green surface. If you are choosing a colored disc, it should be a few inches in diameter for most people. Even a saucer, a can top, a jar lid, or even a piece of construction paper will work for this. But candle flames produce a nice retinal burn that helps make the initial stages more rewarding. For those who see colors, even subtle ones, when they close their eyes or are in the dark, you can even bootstrap a kasana off those with enough careful attention to the colors and to cultivating and organizing them, a skill that takes merely practice to learn. For those using something like candle or plate, place the chosen kasana object about 4 to 5 feet in front of you and slightly below eye level, such that your gaze rests on it easily. Make sure the background setting of your image is something boring, plain, and neutral, so that distracting images are not introduced. Sit comfortably and at ease with a posture that is upright and aligned, but not tense or rigid. Comfort is moderately important, as pain can be very distracting initially. I personally also like lying on a couch or on a bed and staring at an overhead light. If you try a strong light source, like a light bulb, then having something that you can flop down over your eyes once you have stared at the kasana object will help block the light coming through your eyelids and allow a greater appreciation of the fine details of internally generated images. Fine details happen to be important in this practice. Stare at the kasana with relaxed eyes and facial muscles until you feel a shift in which the color starts to bleed around the edges of the kasana if you shift your eyes, or when you notice some visual distortion. This might take from 30 seconds to a minute or two. Then close your eyes and fix on the visual purple after image, a general term which doesn't imply the image will necessarily be purple, but that it will be the complementary color of the object, which, if the color is yellow, will be purple. And pay attention to this, to the exclusion of everything else, if possible. So if the external kasana object is bright, the initial visual purple after image will be dark. And if the kasina, I don't know how to pronounce it. If the kasana is dark, the after image will be light. The visual purple image may wander, spin off to the side, morph, flicker, or fade. But don't worry about that initially. Just keep your attention on it, tracking exactly what it does with a high degree of interest in the fine specifics of every little movement, change, and wiggle. Early on, people will often notice tension in their eye muscles, eyelids, and forehead when their eyes are closed, until they realize that the sort of looking they are now doing doesn't have much to do with their eyes. Eventually, this tension will go away, but initially it can be annoying. That tension is stage and state dependent. Try relaxing your eyes while still paying gentle attention to the visuals. This just takes practice, so don't get frustrated. When whatever organized images fade totally away and there is nothing but the visual static on the inside of your eyelids, open your eyes, stare at the image again as before, wait for the burn into your retinas again, and close your eyes and focus on the image again until it is gone again. Repeating this again and again will eventually build up something powerful. At some point, you will start to notice something beyond just the visual purple after image, and instead something clean, bright, and more defined will begin to glow. If you are using a candle flame, this should be a red dot. Stay with that red dot regardless of what it does until it is finally gone. And then open your eyes and go back to the flame or disc or whatever again. If you are using some other object, then the image should relate in some way to the color, but seem more purified and clean. Continue to repeat the cycle over and over. Consistency in a short period of time with few breaks really helps make this happen and maintains the concentration muscles, which tend to fade very rapidly if we stop practicing. Give all attention to the colors and really commit to making that happen moment after moment. At some point, the created image will begin to get clearer, brighter, more refined, and more stable. If you are using a candle flame and its subsequent red dot as image, it will tend to gain green, blue, and purple rings around it with intricate yellow, rapidly moving fine complex lines in the middle that shift and spin at high speed. Paying attention to that high speed spinning and movement will develop good attention tuning skills that translate extremely well to other meditation cycles. The more refined dot, it might be some other shape depending on what object you start with, is called the nimitta, N-I-M-I-T-T-A, in the Pali commentaries. This nimitta will eventually start to do strange things, such as oscillate between a black dot and some greenish yellow dot, or other variants on this theme. It may acquire all sorts of fine details, change color many times, develop into other images, and even begin to seem alive, like you are watching an animation. The larger the nimitta, the more remarkable the show that it can produce, particularly in terms of exquisite little nuances, images, colors, and shimmering variability. As practice goes stronger, you will notice that your internal intentions and inclinations have more and more control of what shapes and colors the nimitta becomes, as well as where it is in the visual field and how it moves. Let's see here. I think we're going to call it quits right there. And we will take over tomorrow at this location. So keep in mind where we're at. Come back tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in today, and have a great day.